Who let the dishwasher into the dining room? The laugh that followed carried across the entire length of the Whitmore-Lacey Foundation gala, over the white linen tables and the centerpieces of fresh gardenias, past the string quartet playing Debussy near the far window, and straight into the chest of a man standing very still beside a service cart at the edge of the room. His name was Elijah Crane. He was 34 years old, and he had been bussing tables at the Meridian Club in Charleston, South Carolina, for the past 5 months. He was lean in the way that men who have not eaten enough for long stretches tend to be lean, and his hands were the kind of hands that do not match a service uniform, broad and precise, with the particular stillness of someone who has learned to hold very expensive and very fragile things without dropping them. The man who had spoken was Hayden Lacey III. Hayden was 41, silver-templed, wearing a dinner jacket that cost more than Elijah's entire wardrobe twice over. He was the son of the foundation's co-founder and the evening's honorary chair, and he had the particular confidence of a man who has never once in his life arrived anywhere and been told to use the back entrance. Hayden had not spoken to Elijah directly. He had spoken about him, which is different and worse, because it means the speaker does not consider the subject worth the courtesy of address. Seriously, Hayden said to the two men beside him, both lawyers, both from old Charleston money, both smiling the careful smile of men who want to agree with whoever signs their retainer agreements. Why is catering even in here during the program? Elijah did not move. He set the water pitcher on the cart with deliberate quiet and waited. The woman Hayden had been speaking over when he said it was still standing at the podium. Her name was Dr. Nora O.C. Lacey, and she was Hayden's sister-in-law, or had been before his brother died. She was 51 years old, the medical director of the Whitmore-Lacey Children's Spinal Research Institute, and she had flown in that morning from Geneva specifically to speak at this gala, which was the foundation's single largest fundraising event of the year. She had also, 3 seconds before Hayden's comment, lost her place in her remarks because her hands had begun to shake. The shaking had started 6 months ago. Her neurologist in Geneva had a name for it that she had not yet repeated aloud to anyone in this room. The name was primary lateral sclerosis, and it was, her neurologist had told her with the particular practiced gentleness of someone delivering a sentence, progressive, not immediately fatal, not fast, but not reversible, and not, at this stage, controllable in the ways that mattered most for a surgeon who spent 40 hours a week with her hands inside the human spine. She had not yet told the foundation board. She had not told her late husband's family. She had not told her own children, who were 15 and 17, and did not need, before the school year ended, the weight of a word like that settling onto their shoulders. She had told no one, and she stood at the podium with her notes trembling in her hands in front of 300 donors, and Hayden Lacey made a joke about the dishwasher, and the laugh spread the way that cruelty always spreads in rooms full of people who have decided comfort is worth more than conscience. Elijah Crane watched her from the edge of the room. He watched her press her right hand flat against the podium. He watched her jaw tighten. He watched her look down at the notes that were shaking, look back up at the room, and make the decision, visibly and alone, to keep going. He had seen that decision made before. He recognized it the way you recognize a piece of music you learned early and have never been able to forget. His mother had made that decision every morning for the last 4 years of her life. Every morning she had pressed her hand flat against something solid, the kitchen counter, the door frame, the back of a chair, and chosen to keep going. She was a hospice nurse in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she had gone to work every day with hands that shook and eyes that told you she knew what was coming, and she had never, not once, let a patient see it on her face. She had taught him everything she knew, not in a classroom, not in a formal way, but in the way that mothers teach, in the quiet, in passing, in the 10,000 small demonstrations of how a person moves through a difficult world without transferring the difficulty to the person in front of them. She had died of ovarian cancer when Elijah was 26. He had been in his second year of a fellowship at Duke. He had taken a leave of absence to care for her, and then the fellowship had been restructured. And then there had been the lawsuit over his father's estate, and then there had been a period of 18 months that he did not think about, if he could help it. And then there had been the job at the Meridian Club, which paid $16 an hour and allowed him to work the hours that did not interfere with the thing he did between midnight and 5 in the morning in the one-bedroom apartment above the Coin Laundry on King Street. 300 people in this room were here tonight because of the Whitmore Lacey Foundation's work in pediatric spinal research. A woman was standing at the podium whose hands were shaking in a way that had nothing to do with nerves, and Elijah could see it from 40 feet away through a service cart and 2 waiters, because he had seen it before in hands he loved, and because he had spent the better part of a decade learning to read what the body says when it cannot yet say it in words. He picked up the water pitcher. He began walking toward the head table. The program manager, a compact woman named Sandra Vreeland, who ran the gala with the precision of an air traffic controller, appeared at his elbow before he had crossed 20 feet. "The head table is closed during remarks," she said quietly but firmly. "You need to return to the service station." "Yes, ma'am," Elijah said. "I just need 30 seconds at the podium." Sandra looked at him the way people look at someone who has said something in a language they do not speak. "I'm sorry?" The speaker's hands. She has a tremor she's trying to manage. If someone adjusts the podium height by about 2 inches and gives her something solid to brace against, rather than a flat surface, she'll be able to finish her remarks without holding the notes. The pitcher is just an excuse to get close enough. Sandra stared at him. Who are you? "Elijah Crane. I work catering. But I have 30 seconds before she loses her place again. So can we please have this conversation after?" He had already started walking. Hayden Lacey saw him coming, stepped directly into the aisle. Hayden was the kind of man who had played lacrosse at Clemson and still moved like it. Hey, I don't know what you think you're doing, but the program is in progress. You need to go back to wherever." Elijah went around him, not rudely, not with contact, but with the particular calm of someone who has decided that an obstacle is not, in fact, an obstacle. He set the water pitcher on the edge of the head table, reached the podium in 4 more steps, and spoke very quietly into the space beside Dr. O.C. Lacey's right ear. "I'm going to adjust the lectern height. Brace your forearms on the edge while I do it. Don't look at me. Keep looking at the room." She turned her head 1 degree toward him. Her eyes found his for exactly half a second. Something passed between them that was not words. She looked back at the room. He crouched beside the podium, found the height adjustment lever that almost no one outside of event setup ever knows exists, raised the lectern surface 2 inches, and as he rose, placed the small, heavy water glass, solid crystal, 12 ounces, at the exact point on the podium surface where a person's right hand would naturally rest if they were trying to steady something. He straightened, stepped back, and was gone before Hayden Lacey had crossed half the distance between them. Dr. O.C. Lacey placed her right hand around the water glass. The tremor did not disappear, but the notes stopped shaking, and her voice, when she found it again, came out clear and steady, and full of everything she had come here to say. She spoke for 11 minutes. By the 3rd minute, the room was silent in the way that rooms go silent when they realize they are hearing something important. By the 7th minute, a woman at table 6 was crying quietly into a dinner napkin. By the 11th, when Nora O.C. Lacey said the words her late husband had said to her on the night their youngest was born, "The thing worth protecting isn't the institution. It's the child who didn't get to choose it." There was a moment of stillness before the applause, the kind of stillness that a room produces only when something true has been said in it. The applause lasted 4 minutes. Hayden Lacey did not applaud. He stood with his champagne glass held at chest height and stared at the service entrance through which Elijah had disappeared, and his expression was the expression of a man trying to decide how angry he is allowed to be about something he cannot quite explain. Elijah was in the kitchen, running a rack of glasses through the sterilizer, when Sandra Vreeland found him. Explain that to me, she said. I adjusted the podium height. You knew she had a tremor. You knew the adjustment would help. You knew what glass to put there. You did all of that in under 30 seconds in the middle of a live program. She paused. Who are you? Elijah pulled the rack from the sterilizer and set it on the drain board. I work catering. I know what your employment file says. Sandra folded her arms. I also know that the thing you described, reading a neurological tremor from 40 feet in bad lighting and knowing the exact ergonomic correction to compensate, that is not something you learn bussing tables. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, My mother had essential tremor. I watched her manage it for years. It was true. It was also not the whole truth, and Sandra, who had been running events for 22 years, knew the difference between a complete answer and a true one. She studied him for another moment, then said, Dr. O.C. Lacey wants to speak with you. He looked up. She asked one of the servers where the man from catering went. When they described you, she asked me to find you. Elijah was quiet. You don't have to, Sandra said. But she asked. He set down the glass rack. He removed his service apron and folded it over the edge of the sink with the same careful habit he applied to everything. Neat, deliberate, no motion wasted. He went. The coat room at the Meridian Club was the quietest place in the building during a gala. It smelled like cedar and old wool. Dr. Nora O.C. Lacey was sitting on the bench inside it with both hands resting palm up on her knees in the way that people sometimes sit when they are finally alone after a very long effort. She looked up when he came in. Close the door, she said. He did. How long, she said. Have I had it? The question surprised him. Not the question itself, but the directness of it. Most people, in his experience, asked the question sideways. They said, Do you notice anything? Or is something wrong with my hands? They did not ask. In a coat room at a foundation gala 11 minutes after meeting someone, how long have I had it? Because that formulation assumes the answer is not, you don't have anything. It assumes there is a thing, that it is real, and that the only variable is time. I don't know exactly, he said. Based on what I observed tonight, I would say the presentation is consistent with something you've been managing for at least several months. The compensation patterns are practiced. She nodded once. Her face was still. You already know what it is, he said. Yes. Then you don't need me to tell you. No. She looked at her hands. I need you to tell me what you are, because I have been a spinal surgeon for 23 years, and I have colleagues at Hopkins and Mayo and the Karolinska, and not one of them has looked at my hands for 30 seconds and done what you just did at that podium. She lifted her eyes to his. So, what are you? The question landed in the air between them and stayed. Elijah sat down on the bench across from her. The cedar smell was quiet around them. From far away, they could hear the string quartet starting up again. I'm a catering employee, he said. Elijah. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I was 2 years into a neurology fellowship at Duke when my mother got sick. I took a leave of absence to care for her. When she died, the fellowship cohort had restructured and the position was gone. I applied to 5 programs. I was declined by 4 and waitlisted indefinitely by the 5th. I did not have the right institutional affiliations. I had not published during my leave. My recommenders had moved on. He paused. I have been applying in one form or another for 8 years. I have been declined 43 times. I work at the Meridian Club because it pays enough to cover the apartment where I continue to study, because I cannot stop, and because every so often, in a situation like tonight, it puts me in a room where the work is actually needed. Dr. O.C. Lacey looked at him for a very long time. 43 times, she said. 43. And tonight you walked across a dining room to adjust a podium for a stranger. You weren't just a stranger. You were someone whose hands were shaking in a way I recognized. He met her gaze. And you weren't going to ask anyone for help. She looked down at her hands again. The tremor was visible now, in the quiet, without the glass to anchor it. Small and persistent and entirely itself. My late husband founded this institute, she said. He died 4 years ago, pancreatic. I have run the medical division since. We are in the middle of the largest research initiative the Foundation has ever undertaken, a longitudinal study on pediatric spinal decompression outcomes. 47 hospitals, 9 countries, 312 children. She paused. I have not told the board about my diagnosis. I have not told my children. I have not told anyone. I know, Elijah said. You know. You came here alone. You drove yourself. You carried your own notes. You adjusted the podium yourself during the sound check. I saw you when I was setting up the service station, and you got it slightly wrong, which is why it was at the wrong height when you needed it. She stared at him. You are managing everything by yourself, he said. You have been managing everything by yourself for a long time. And tonight, in the middle of a room full of 300 people whose entire purpose for being there is to support the work you do, not one of them saw what was happening until it was almost too late. Nora O.C. Lacey sat very still. Outside the coat room, someone laughed at something, bright and social and entirely far away. Then she said, What do you know about primary lateral sclerosis? Enough, Elijah said. More than most people who haven't treated it. Less than I'd like. What's the distinction, clinically, between PLS and ALS in early presentation? Absence of lower motor neuron involvement, no fasciculations, no muscle atrophy in the early stages. Upper motor neuron signs only, spasticity, hyperreflexia, the Babinski response. In PLS, the progression is slower, median survival substantially longer, but the clinical picture in the first 12 to 18 months can be indistinguishable from ALS on a bad day, she said. Yes. She was quiet. What does your current neurologist have you on? Riluzole. Standard. Any trial enrollment? I haven't pursued it. Why? She looked at him with the specific directness of someone who has spent a career telling people true things they don't want to hear. Because I'm afraid, she said, that if I enroll in a trial and the board finds out, they will remove me from the study. And I cannot let that happen before it's finished. Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then he said, How long before it's finished? 18 months. 20 if we're being honest about the data collection timeline. And your symptom progression at current rate. I can manage it for 18 months. Maybe. With the right protocols, the right support, and someone who actually knows what they're looking at on the days when I can't look at it myself. The word hung between them, unspoken but present. Someone. Elijah looked at his hands. They were, in their way, the opposite of Nora's, completely still. My mother used to say, he said, that the hands know what the mind is still deciding. Nora looked at his hands, then at his face. I have a proposal, she said. Hayden Lacey found out on a Tuesday. He walked into the Foundation's executive conference room for the quarterly board review and found a man he did not recognize sitting at the table in a gray suit with a yellow legal pad full of handwritten notes and a cup of black coffee, speaking with the calm authority of someone who has been in the room long enough to know exactly where the door is. Who is this? Hayden said. Nora, sitting at the head of the table, said, This is Elijah Crane. He is our new clinical research coordinator and my designated medical proxy for the duration of the longitudinal study. Hayden stared at the man for a long moment. Recognition moved slowly across his face like a tide coming in. The dining room, the service cart, the dishwasher joke, and the laugh that had followed it. You're the catering guy, Hayden said. Elijah looked up from the legal pad. I was, yes, Nora. Hayden turned to her, and his voice had dropped into the register that men use when they want to sound reasonable in the presence of other board members. This is highly irregular. You cannot simply appoint whoever this is to a clinical role without going through the hiring committee. The hiring committee approved the appointment on Friday, Nora said. The paperwork is in your inbox. If you'd like to review Mr. Crane's qualifications, I'd be happy to summarize them, but I'd suggest you sit down first. Hayden did not sit down. Elijah Crane, Nora said, addressing the room rather than Hayden, completed his undergraduate degree in neuroscience at Howard University, summa cum laude. He completed a master's degree in clinical neurology at Georgetown while working nights at a rehabilitation center in D.C. He was accepted to the neurology fellowship at Duke at age 26, one of two positions awarded nationally that year. He took a leave of absence to provide end-of-life care for his mother and was unable to return to the fellowship due to administrative restructuring. In the 8 years since, he has published, under a pseudonym due to his lack of institutional affiliation, 11 peer-reviewed papers on upper motor neuron disease, progression, and adaptive clinical protocols for patients with tremor-based conditions. 2 of those papers are cited in the methodology of our current longitudinal study. She paused. He has also, in the past 6 weeks, developed a management protocol for my own condition that has allowed me to continue my clinical work at full capacity. He did this without being asked, without being paid, and without telling anyone. The room was quiet. Elijah had not looked up from his legal pad during any of this. He was writing something, calmly, in the margin. He was declined for institutional positions 43 times, Nora continued. Not because he was not qualified, because he was not connected, because he took time away to care for his dying mother, because the system that was supposed to identify people like him was more interested in protecting the people already inside it. Hayden opened his mouth. "Sit down, Hayden," said a woman at the far end of the table. Her name was Dr. Constance Malloy, and she was 80 years old, and she had been on the foundation board since it was founded, and she had a voice that did not invite argument. Hayden sat down. "Mr. Crane," Constance said, "would you like to present the updated study protocol, or would you prefer to begin with the adaptive care framework?" Elijah looked up. He looked at Constance. Something in his face, the first loosening of what had been for the entire meeting, absolute professional stillness, moved. "The protocol," he said. "And then the framework. If that's all right, that's perfectly all right," Constance said. He opened his legal pad. The week the story broke. And it did break. The way stories break when someone in a room full of people with phones witnesses something they cannot not share. Elijah was in the Foundation Library, reading a radiograph. A reporter from a medical journal had gotten hold of one of the 11 papers. A board member's daughter had posted something on social media about the dishwasher doctor. A journalist had connected 3 facts that nobody had thought to connect before. The papers, the pseudonym, the gala. The headline that ran in the South Carolina Medical Review was not the one Elijah would have chosen. It was the one the story demanded. The doctor who was never let in. The call started the day after. 5 fellowship programs, 2 hospital systems, a clinical research institute in Boston, the dean of the Duke Medical School, who had been, when Elijah was 26, the same dean who signed the letter informing him that his leave of absence position could not be held. Elijah took the call from Duke, standing in the Foundation parking lot on a Wednesday morning in the middle of a light rain. He let the dean speak for 4 minutes. He thanked him. He said he would be in touch. He stood in the rain for another minute after the call ended, holding the phone at his side, looking at nothing in particular. A sparrow landed on the parking barrier 3 feet away, looked at him, and left. Then he went back inside. Nora found him at his desk an hour later. "Duke called," she said. "It was not a question. Yes. What did they want?" "To offer a position. Retroactive fellowship credit. Fast track to board certification." He paused, and an apology, which took about 90 seconds, and was, I think, sincere. Nora was quiet. "I told them I would be in touch," Elijah said, "after the study is finished." She looked at him. 47 hospitals, he said. 9 countries, 312 children, 18 months. He looked up from the desk. "I'm not leaving." Nora sat down slowly in the chair across from him. Outside the window, the rain was picking up. "You could have left 8 years ago," she said. "You could have found a different path. Something easier. I know. Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. His hands were still on the desk, the way they always were, broad and precise, and entirely at rest. "My mother used to say," he said, "that medicine is not a career. It is a response. You respond because someone is sick, not because someone is watching. And if you stop responding the first time, the room doesn't open the door for you, then you weren't responding to the patient. You were responding to the door. Nora looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "Your mother sounds like she was remarkable." "She was," Elijah said. "She would have hated tonight's dinner menu, though. She thought risotto should never be served at events over 200 people." Nora laughed, a real laugh, short and unguarded, the kind that comes out before you've decided to let it. She pressed her right hand flat on the desk, the way she pressed it on solid things when she needed to stay steady, and laughed. The longitudinal study published in 22 months, 2 months behind schedule, because 3 datasets from a hospital network in South Carolina needed to be rerun, and nobody argued about taking the extra time. The results changed the standard of care for pediatric spinal decompression in 9 countries. The methodology section cited 11 prior papers and included a full acknowledgement of the research coordinator's contribution by name in the first paragraph. It was the first peer-reviewed publication to carry Elijah Crane's name, his real name, above the pseudonym that had carried his thinking for 8 years. Dr. Nora O.C. Lacey was the senior author. She presented the study at the International Conference in Vienna in the spring, standing at a lectern that was precisely the right height, with a glass of water positioned exactly where her right hand needed it to be. She did not shake. Elijah Crane enrolled in an accelerated board certification track at Johns Hopkins that autumn. The program had been, until 6 months earlier, closed to applicants without current institutional affiliation. The exception was made, formally and in writing, by the admissions board. The exception cited no special circumstances. It cited only the work. Hayden Lacey resigned from the foundation board that same spring. His letter cited personal reasons. No one at the foundation pressed him for elaboration, and he did not offer any. He was, by the following year, understood to have relocated to Atlanta. His name appeared in no further public records connected to the Whitmore-Lacey Foundation. The foundation's annual gala the following year was held, as always, at the Meridian Club. The same string quartet played Debussy near the far window. The gardenias were fresh. The tables were white linen. There was no service card at the edge of the room this year. The man who had stood beside it was at the head table, in a charcoal suit that was his own and fit him properly. And when the evening's program began and the new board chair introduced the research team, she said Elijah's name first, and the room stood up before she had finished the sentence. He did not stand to receive it. He sat and looked at his hands, still, both of them, the way they had always been, and the applause went on, and he let it. There is a version of this story where Elijah Crane gives up after the 5th rejection, after the 10th, after the 35th. There is a version where he is never in the dining room at the gala, because he has taken a different job, or moved away, or simply decided that a world that does not open its doors does not deserve what he carries in his hands. There is a version where Nora O.C. Lacey finishes her remarks and goes home and tells no one and manages alone until she cannot manage anymore. There is a version where Hayden Lacey makes his joke, and the room laughs, and the woman at the podium absorbs it the way people absorb cruelty when they have decided there is no one coming. Those versions exist. They happen every day in rooms like that one, to people whose hands know things the room is not willing to learn. What this room chose on one particular night was different, and it was different because of one man who folded his apron over the edge of a sink and walked across a dining room and decided that the question of whether he was welcome there was less important than the question of whether someone needed him. If you have ever been told that you are the wrong person for a room, that your hands are not the right hands, that your name is not the right name, that your path was too broken to lead anywhere worth going, this story is for you. Share it with someone who is still standing outside the door, and ask yourself what you would have done if you had been in that dining room. When the laugh came and the room stayed still, and one man decided that stillness was not, in fact, the only option. What would you have done?